So thank you guys for being here for our Salon series. Thank you for subscribing. If you're not a subscriber, get out. You don't have to leave, but you can subscribe and support independent journalism so we could have these conversations, and that would be appreciated. And I love these series because Bosch Thermador Gaggenau sponsors it. So please give those guys good recognition. But it allows us to get intimate with really senior people. And today's I'm very happy to have Sam here today. Sam is somebody who redefined what hospitality is. He came on the heels of Ian Schrager, Andre Balazs, and real amazing trendsetters. And he took the baton and changed hospitality and changed how lifestyle hospitality is, which he'll explain, because I'm ashamed to say up until about 20 minutes ago, I didn't know what lifestyle hospitality was. But, I guess I'm not a club person. But anyways, he started in the business very young. I'm going to give you a background so we don't waste our time asking him these questions. He was an immigrant like myself from Iran. He came here. He was the premier club promoter and club owner in Los Angeles at a very young age. And he became the king of clubs in Los Angeles. But very early on, he wanted to grow and expand it. And at a time where you would think you would be number one in something and you want to continue to do it, he was like, I want to get into hotels. I want to get into restaurants. I want to expand. And you were, 26 years old when that was happening. And so he expanded very fast. Recently, the company that he started, when he was 26 years old, he sold it in 2019 for $850 million, which he must have been very happy with. And after that, he had a 3-year non-compete. So in those 3 years, he started C3, and which is a massive brand of 40 different restaurants that he licenses out to airlines, to hotels, and to a lot of other places that we'll get into. So please put your hands together for Sam Nazarian. How was that? Was that a good background?
That was good.
Yeah.
I think it's not a very complicated story, right? I think it's probably more of an improbable story. In the backgrounds that we have, businesses that we got into. But it's we were just talking earlier about how old we are now, right? I mean, I'm going to be 50 in July, and I don't feel 50, but you've lived a life. I mean, 25 years of trying to disrupt and learn as you go, and it's definitely been a fun ride.
Something you said earlier that was interesting. You said that when you were younger, you had your fingerprints all over the nightlife. You knew what was the hot place. You knew what was the trend, and you went into the club business and you did really well. You went into the restaurant business. You created lifestyle hospitality. Tell us what lifestyle hospitality is.
Well, I mean, to me, lifestyle was kind of born from the word boutique. I mean, when I was growing up, there was two visionaries, really Andre Balazs and Ian Schrager, and they were the first ones to really bring entertainment and design and energy into hotels. Most of you guys probably, some of us remember, you wouldn't go to a hotel, if you're living in New York for a bar or a drink. I mean, you'd go to a restaurant. And to me, when I was growing up in my early 20s, that was really where the kind of disruption was happening, was bringing entertainment and design and, these things that were just, I mean, I remember, people remember the first time they walked into the Delano. Yeah. You remember the first time
That's so true.
Right?
That's so true.
You remember the first time you walked into, the Mondrian or the Chateau Marmont or the Mercer. I mean, that feeling of, and it wasn't because they spent a lot of money. It was actually the opposite, right? It was the fact that they did something that just had not been done in that context of that setting. And when I was starting, in my kind of process early on, we built a brand. The first brand we built before I started SLS was the Viceroy in Santa Monica, and the Viceroy brand. And that's when I really fell in love with the business. And I was 24, 25 years old, and I'm like, this is so unbelievable. It's real estate, it's design, it's branding, it's operation. And fundamentally, the one thing I saw as an investor in these hotels was there wasn't a continuity. We had a guy running our restaurant, we had a guy running our pool, the cool guy in town. And there was a hotel operator and there was a developer. So there was like 4 people fighting for, their own fee streams and their lack of connectivity and ultimately accountability. So In 2002, I went to my dad. I said, I want to start my own operating company. And he wasn't that he wasn't supportive, but nightlife was a big component of that.
Yeah.
And the backgrounds we come from. That's not really like something you want to come home and say, I want to start a nightclub. But
they call it Jelf.
Exactly. So I knew that was a core pillar. If I ultimately I wanted to build the Four Seasons of our generation. That was my ambition.
Yeah.
And Izzy Sharp, who's really kind of one of the guys who...
Well, one thing I appreciated about the way you explained it earlier was that, you walk into an SLS, right? I mean, you created that brand, and you walk into an SLS, whether it's in the Bahamas or, anywhere else around the world, and you walk in and you immediately feel the vibe and the energy that's in that lobby. And that's the kind of energy you created with SLS. That's the time where you were trying to elevate from the clubs into the restaurants, where you're bringing the clubs into the restaurants, into the hotels. But you also brought amazing design and culinary food. Like, you really went after the new emerging chefs like Jose Andres, who at the time, he was well known, but you brought him to all of these different hotels. Philip Stark, that had his fingerprints all over your SLS. How did you bring those guys in?
Well, I mean, Philippe was, I think, at that time, the most relevant designer in the space. I mean, he created the space. I mean, Ian Schrager gets a lot of credit, but Philippe was the person who came up with these amazing ideas, this shock and awe design, obviously French. So after him and Ian fell apart or separated, Barry was trying to get him for W. And I'd send him letters, okay? This is like, emails were just emerging. And I'd send him letters, and I'd call his office relentlessly, and finally, after 2 years, he responded. And he came to LA. He hated LA, and I said, I really want to work with you. And we did one project with him on Sunset, and then another project, and then I bought the Ritz Plaza Hotel here in Miami, and we did our first hotel contract. And then within 2 years, I signed him to a 15-year North American exclusivity. So we kind of made the bet. Your Mets just made a bet on this. I made my bet on Philippe, and that was really the pivotal game changer for me, because I was a 27, 28-year-old kid. I had a lot of success in the nightlife and restaurant space just because we're doing something different in LA. But he opened up his whole world, his access to Europe and furniture design, and seeing how he sees things in a fourth dimension, that he kind of shed some light into how I saw things. And that was a pivotal thing. Jose he was a small operator in Washington, D.C. when I first heard about him, Jose Andres. And he was introduced to me by a guy out of San Francisco that I was trying to do business with, a chef, a very famous chef, that we ended up doing business with 20 years later in Charles Fan and Slanted Door. And I went and spoke to Jose, and he's the same guy you see now. Yeah. But he had absolutely no... he didn't have the big experience at that point. People didn't really know him, but he was a disciple of Ferran Adrià and El Bulli and Spanish food. And he was somebody who had the ambition of rolling Spanish food out in the world. He just didn't know how, and I gave him the platform. So I created the bazaar, and I made him the chef, and he became who he became.
And so who are you excited about now in terms of designers and culinary people?
Well, I think right now we have a roster of about 7 of the top culinarians in different cuisine categories, right? We have guys like Danny Garcia, who's a 3-star Michelin chef from Marbella, who's one of the most technical chefs you've ever seen. Very, very exact opposite of Jose.
That's Casadena.
Casadena, exactly. And we have a lot of projects with him. He's probably the biggest guy in Spain right now. We have Chef Morimoto, who's an amazing chef, who's the original Lion chef from... and he was Nobu's first executive chef, Chef Katsuya, things like that. We're spending a lot of time in our new platform in the estate, which is focusing on how to get these amazing thinkers and deliver food that is still very good, but more approachable as far as kind of the levels of longevity and preventative medicine that we're doing, and they're all very excited about it.
I want to get into the States, but I wanted to capture the first part of your life.
The first chapter.
So SBE, SLS became huge. You also started Hyde Hotels, Katsuya, obviously, and a lot of other brands. But you sold the hotel business to Accor for $850 million.
I'll give you a little bit of color before. So I opened the first SLS hotel in Beverly Hills, 297-room hotel. And SLS stood for the three things I thought was missing in the hotel world. There was a lot of luxurious hotels, with service, and there was a lot of stylish hotels, but there wasn't one I like to call it not your father's Four Seasons. So SLS stands for Style, Luxury, and Service. And we opened January 1, 2009, which is not the best time to open a luxury hotel in Beverly Hills, but the food and beverage and what we did with Philippe and Jose really kind of catapulted us. And from one hotel in 2009 to 100 hotels in 2019.
Wow.
And we pushed every envelope of that lifestyle space. So we had one brand, then we went to 5 brands. I bought Ian's old company, Morgan's Hotel Group, and I picked up the Mondrian and the Delano and the Hudson and 13 hotels with that acquisition. And then we quickly became the largest in the lifestyle space globally. We also started selling residential with our brands. So we partnered with a company called Related, and we did about 19 residential towers around the world, branded SLS or Mondrian or Hyde. And so we kind of, at every step, carved out, why can't we do this, why can't we do that? Is the customer there?
Yeah.
And which is fun. That's the part that really got me excited. And then in 2019, the space had, we had, most of our hotels were international. 80% of our pipeline was international. We had 9 offices and 11,000 employees, and I was 44.
Yeah. And
we decided, and my wife is here as a family, we got an amazing offer from a huge strategic company at a very, very unbelievable multiple. And I wasn't the customer anymore.
Yep.
That we were talking earlier, when I built SLS, I built it for me.
Yeah.
And 20 years later, I wasn't the same guy, but the brand was, it evolved a little bit, but it was still a lifestyle hotel. So that's when we ended up selling December of 2019. So that one I timed right.
Was it a sort of a pivotal moment for you when you bought the Morgan Hotels? Because you had, obviously, Ian Schrager was somebody that you admired a lot. And so to be able to buy his company, how did that feel?
Well, I mean, Ian had left the company about 4 or 5 years before, and he had done a deal with Marriott to create the Edition brand. And a lot of the hotels, so we, in essence, I looked at Morgan's portfolio, and I looked at 2 brands that I really loved. One was Delano, one was Mondrian. But the Delano and Mondrian in 2016 weren't what they used to be. So I had to take the risk of rebranding them and retelling the story. A lot of the properties were just, we're not in great shape. The Sanderson in London, the St. Martin's Lane, Clift Hotel in San Francisco. But for me, it was great because I grew up, I was in the business because of these hotels.
Right.
And making them part of our collection, and then having an international footprint, which gave us right away, outside of the Bahamas, but it gave us Europe, Middle East, and we did our first hotel in Qatar, which was in their pipeline, in the Mondrian in Doha for the Amir. But it was listen, I don't know about you, but when you grow up as an immigrant in this country, right, and especially in an industry that you have no background at all, it wasn't like our family was in this business, all of a sudden you go from somebody who said he's a small operator to now being the leader in the space. I know you know that in your world, right? So there's a little bit of excitement, but also there's a little bit of self-consciousness around it, right? It's like, fuck, this thing could blow up any minute, right? It's like, now you're a target, and especially at the age that I was at. And it was very pivotal, Morgan's, because that cemented our scale. Yeah. And in our business, scale is wins the day.
It also gave you a lot of headaches.
Yeah, I mean, we had to go back to 6,000 employees. We had to go back to 13 hotel owners who were not happy with the current management, and we had to kind of and some of these like Hamid bin Jassim, the former prime minister of Qatar. I mean, he owned 2 of the hotels, and he wanted me to come to Doha to meet him. I don't know if I was ever going to come back. Right. It's like that kind of thing. They weren't very happy. We had institutions, we had REITs, we had asset managers that were unhappy, but we turned them all around, and then we grew that, obviously, And Mondrian became our biggest growing brand. From 3 hotels, we took it to 19 hotels around the world and retold that story because at the end of the day, we're in the storytelling business, right? So we have to tell the story of each brand and how they work in communities.
And then you had a 3-year non-compete with them, and I guess you just couldn't wait to get back into it because then as soon as the non-compete ended, you had a fully developed idea for the States and HQ.
Right. Yeah, the non-compete was also during COVID, so which helped a little bit. But there was a couple things. I had launched a food business, in 2019, C3, the one you had mentioned, and that was the premise of. I realized at 45 that I didn't know what that next generation was doing. I had no connectivity to millennials, Gen Z. I had become the old guy in the room when I was always the young guy in the room. So we decided to build a portfolio of brands that were focused around premium fast casual, premium QSR, and I spent a lot of time in that. And then during COVID, that thing just boomed because this ghost kitchen kind of space that we all remember living through. So we spent a lot of time there. We raised about $100 million for that business with big institutions like Brookfield. First time I raised money for something. I guess it was pretty cool. And then it's a different skill set. And then I always knew that when I was selling my company in 2019, the hotel company, because I kept all the other parts. I just sold the hotel management business. I kept SBE, I kept the restaurants, I kept the nightclubs. And I was more interested in 2019 around building a new brand for me, the new me.
Yeah.
And that's where...
The family man with 3 daughters, right? So, yeah.
Well, no, a 44-year-old guy who's out of shape, who doesn't know anything about his health, who wants a luxury environment, but he wants a much different luxury environment, who's more curious around kind of hormone therapy and functional medicine. And he thinks that's, because my customers started with me in nightclubs. They went to my restaurants and they went to my hotels. They bought residences with me. And now they're kind of in the same boat, right? And they're at the next pivotal stage in their life. And if I were to go to a hotel, we did the tallest hotel I ever did was a 76-story SLS in Dubai. And that's not a place I would want to stay. I want to go stay, let's say, Four Seasons, one and only, Amman, Rosewood. And so when I knew I was selling that company, half the reason that I convinced myself to sell it was because I knew I was going to embark on a new journey.
You grew out of it. Yeah. And then you mentioned that it actually brought you down and you wanted a reset. And did that happen because you had a serious health scare that almost killed you? Did that happen before you decided to go into the wellness or after?
No, it happened during the testing because we partnered. We started a new platform, understanding preventative testing. We functional medicine. So in 22, I ended up partnering with one of my heroes, a guy named Tony Robbins, which was a very unique thing for him to do, right? To get into the hotel business. And he had made some investments in preventative medicine, functional medicine. And one of his investments was a company called Fountain Life, based in Orlando. And they build these amazing environments where you get all like the Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic type testing, MRI, CT, bone density, all of it in one small, manageable environment. And then by testing, then you can understand your genomics and biomarkers and functional medicine. So that company we ended up exclusively partnering with, and the idea is to put those in our hotels, as we have 13, 14 hotels we're building around the world. Through that process, I said to my wife, let's go try it out. Yeah. And I had the best doctors in Beverly Hills. And I just had massive knee surgery, and I was starting to get back into shape. And 3 days after I did the CT and the MRI and the blood, they called me and they said, there's an aneurysm we found in your brain. And aneurysm in theory is perfectly fine unless it ruptures and then you're dead, right? So it was a very a wake-up call. And if I didn't do this testing, I wouldn't have known I had it. And I got it removed within 30 days. And after 7-hour brain surgery, it's done. You don't have to worry about it again. Yeah. The process is that kind of 7-hour brain surgery, and which kind of reinforced how preventative medicine can change people's lives.
But that really saved your life.
Yeah, it was going to rupture. Yeah. It was a 7.5 millimeter. They call it an abnormal aneurysm, which is in the main artery of your brain.
Yeah. And you mentioned the 14 hotels that you guys are building right now. Those are the states.
Correct.
Those are the ones you're partnering with Tony Robbins.
Correct.
Right? And how is Tony Robbins like after a meeting? Do you feel motivated after you like leave a meeting?
I didn't appreciate Tony's reach until you get to know Tony. And you don't, the guy's probably now 40 years into it, more compelled to work. I mean, he's the hardest working person I've ever met still to today. He is somebody who's just transcends, so many different demographics, the people that go to him because they need, emotional support, financial. He teaches people not through just, this is how you do it. He brings the best people of the industry around, and he talks to them, and then by talking to enough of them, he finds some sort of common theme, and that's what he talks to his folks, whether it's in his books and things like that. But I was talking to him today. Listen, you get a voice note. He loves voice notes. I get voice notes from him maybe 3 to 4 times a week, if sometimes more. And sometimes you just pinch yourself like this guy's like one of the most forward-thinking thought leaders of this generation. I mean, there's probably not two people like him in the world who bet on this, kind of self-healing and confidence and the things that he always stood for and still stands for. But he is, he's a 20% partner in our business, so it's not like but it's still for him. It's like I said, Tony, you have a hotel company. Whatever, you tell me your vision, and we execute it. And he's just been unbelievable. It's kind of like it was almost like the Philippe Stark moment. When I met Philippe, he opened his whole world to me. Tony opened up his whole world to me, and he does it every day. And it's just unbelievable to have him.
You mentioned earlier that you wanted to create things that you want to take your family to, and the idea with the States is that this is sort of the 6-star of hotels, and that people can go there and get all this sort of biohacking done for longevity and all of that. It's so what are we talking about in terms of prices?
Well, as far as the hotel piece, it's
it's like competing with the Amman and places like that.
Amman, Rosewood, Four Seasons. So the 13 projects we have now are in the Middle East, in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Bahrain. We have 2 projects in Saudi, so that's a big kind of ground-up project markets that are funding these things. We have projects in the Caribbean, in St. Kitts and Dominican Republic. We're doing a big project in Edgewater, a 290 unit residential project in Edgewater that's branded the estate. So there's a whole living component. There's residential in all of our projects, which we made a big bet on.
Which is what the Amman is doing too, right? Obviously.
Yeah, all the luxury brands have residential because that's how they pay for the projects, the developers, right? Because they're so expensive to build. For us, what we think is that, and all the guys in our competitive set I know, where I'm fans of all of them, whether it's Vlad or Rada or Doug, the guys from Emerge, and one and only now is the Dubai kind of sovereign fund. But the one thing they haven't been able to do is integrate longevity, preventative medicine, and medical spas.
Right.
Because it's not a business they want to do. It's not that they can't, but it's hard to go back and change, 124 seasons with a new brand standard. Right. So the fact that we're doing this luxury brand out of the gate with this capacity and partnering with the 2 biggest companies in the world that do this. One is Found Life, the diagnostic business, and then the other one is a company out of Switzerland called Clinique La Paris, which is an 85-year-old brand out of Montreux, Switzerland, which is the most recognized brand in medical spas, holistic, weight loss. So I was lucky enough to pull those people together and deliver that.
And with the Amman, I hate to keep bringing them up, but there's a theme like with the Amman resorts where like you walk into their lobby, you sort of sense that you're in Amman. And what is that theme going to be for the States?
Well, I think for us the biggest differentiator is us knowing you before you get there, not just hi, Mr. Nazarian, welcome back to the Four Seasons or the Amman. Is that we're already set up for you because of the fact you've gone to our clinics. And we already have a program for you. So the reason I called it the estate is that, I'd always envisioned somebody coming, when you go to an estate, everything, it's like going, we're coining a new phrase called yacht service. The best service in the world is if you guys been on a yacht. It's like,
raise your hands if you've been on a yacht.
Well, there's like 9 people to take care of 6 people. So it's predictive. They know you're coming. They know your likes, your dislikes. We take it one step further as far as understanding your biomarkers, your genomics, and what are the things that are giving you inflammation. What are you there to do, as far as the work you're ready to do? And to me, that's the biggest differentiation. Ultimately, you go to an Amman or Rosewood, for the most part, we all work with the same designers. Right, integrated food and beverage is another key differentiation for us. So, integrating our chefs. We do have culinary institutes in our project, so you can go have a great dinner, and then you can learn how to make it the next day. So we think giving people that ability of understanding how food is tied into also their own personal genomics and biomarkers, and which causes a lot of things that and then that big part of what we do is sleep. Sleep is a big part of our resorts. And how people can understand how sleep is one of the massive pillars of longevity.
How do you incorporate sleep into?
Well, there's right now we're working with a company called Sleep 8, right? So all of our brand standards will have this. Basically, it's a cover that comes on the mattress and regulates your body temperature when you sleep, which gives you kind of the REM sleep, which helps you do that. There's a lot of components around how the lighting and making sure you go completely blackout shade affects your sleep. And there's a lot of rituals you do before you go to sleep that helps your sleep. So these are all things that are brand standards in suite that you can do that we kind of promote from that perspective.
Outside of wellness, what do you think is the next amenity that people are going to look for?
I mean, in the luxury category, I think longevity, preventative medicine, and medical spas are the three things that currently do not exist in any luxury hotel for the most part. So I think that alone will move the needle.
Yeah.
I think the ability of customers, our residential communities had always been kind of communities. We were talking earlier about, my good friend Mike Meldman in Discovery Land and, how he built amazing communities. So I think still having that community within going from property to property. Our residential buyers, part of their packages, they can go to our properties and get full VIP treatments in our properties. Our people that come to our clinics, they also can come to our properties. So we decided to really build. That's why it's taken 5 years to build the whole ecosystem around healthcare and longevity, not just bits and pieces of it. There's a lot of people that are doing bits and pieces. There's great med spas that you go to. There's great things. There's Pernuva. You can go get a scan. You can go, but it's never been done the way we're doing it, which is the whole story, 365 days a year. And a big bet we made is on telehealth. So we have 300 functional doctors in telehealth that can constantly be at your disposal, 365 days a year.
So that's a lot of outlay, for these projects. Obviously, you're not just hiring hostesses and waitresses. You're hiring doctors and nurses that you have to carry around the year or so.
Well, we carry them through our partnership with Fountain Life. Fountain Life has really created this amazing telehealth network where they go to doctors who understand functional medicine, right? It's not just traditional doctors. It's doctors that, when you see our reports and our AI, if you may happen to have a certain condition, these doctors focus on reversing it, not just giving you a statin, So that's kind of where functional hormone therapy, peptides, both for men and women, the ability of like testosterone replacement and hormone. So those doctors are doctors in their own world. So we don't carry them. We just pay them for their services, and then they stay with you within our tech stack.
So there's that component is sort of outsourced.
It's outsourced, yeah. It's outsourced through Fountain Life, but we also have our own medical team. So we do have the capability and the expertise, but we don't have 200 doctors sitting on payroll for us.
That's good.
That's not the best model.
And your other brand, HQ,
yeah.
That's something that Wyndham came to you, or because you're partnering with Wyndham on a series of projects. How many units are you guys working on?
So through that process of selling the lifestyle company, I got approached obviously by Hilton, Hyatt, all these other guys. What are you going to do back in lifestyle? And I wasn't going to do another lifestyle brand. I was really focused on the estate, but I saw a white space again. And when you see something, you can't unsee it, right? And so I spent a lot of time saying, this is something I want to do? And the white space was around attracting the new consumer, millennial, Gen Z, Hispanic, and Latino. It's 50% of the market today. And it's Gen Z and millennials identify Airbnb at 65% of their hotel brand. So it's not good for the hotel industry, right? Airbnb is disrupted, right?
Yeah.
So we decided to build a new platform called HQ, which means headquarters, and we partnered with the biggest hotel company in the world, Wyndham, and we own the business. They're our distribution and exclusive partner, and we're going to get to 50 or 75 hotels in that business, and then ultimately sell that business.
And how is that going to stand out?
It's standing out because of, again, integrated food and beverage.
Yeah.
We also partnered there with another wellness company called The Well, which is started here in New York. And we've also attracted, it's like there, Marc Anthony's my partner.
Yeah.
And we're talking about Marc being the, kind of the Frank Sinatra of the Hispanic and Latino world, and his connectivity to all of the young up-and-coming talent. He's the guy. So we've built a lot of, like our C3 business has a lot of brands that fit within that. We have a lot of partnerships with millennial and Gen Z massive channels, like minimum 100 million subscribers on YouTube. So that's how we market it, and that's how it differentiates. And it's also a 4-star-ish product, meaning it's not to the finishes of an SLS was or a Mondrian. It's more to the finishes of a Standard or a Moxie, but it's designed for massive growth. And we already have about 14, 15 of those as well. So,
what do you think is the next sort of a region for luxury travel? I feel like, you see all these crazy projects in Saudi Arabia. It's not a place I would think that I want to go vacation.
Well, I think the GCC as a whole, at every step has been all the countries have been competing on how to define themselves. When we did our project in Qatar in 2015, Qatar was the place. That's where all the money was, right? They were building into the World Cup, which they had a line of sight. Dubai, now it's Abu Dhabi, right? And now it's kind of the different Emirates. The GCC as a whole will be the center of development, both from a fintech perspective, AI. I mean, they've gone all in, and it's a place that people want to live. They feel safe. Ironically, Saudi is a massive country. I mean, there's 5 gigabyte cities. We have projects in 2 of them, and they're building with a big bet into bringing new customers into that. And the west coast of Saudi is it's a 4-hour flight from Europe, so you're pretty close, and the temperature's different just as far as the.
But what's the area you're excited about?
I personally, I love the Caribbean, and I love Switzerland. Right. Those are 2 places my wife and I, we love, as of Europe's concerned, we think Switzerland is so undervalued. Yeah. There aren't branded properties in Switzerland, and there's so many places to go. It's safe. The weather's relatively, calm in the summers, and it's just a very organized civilization. So it's like, right? And they actually welcome tourists, unlike Spain today and some of these other markets where they want nothing to do with you. And it's very hard to do business. And the other one is the Caribbean. There's so many islands in the Caribbean that are just in the culture of every one of these islands. The culture. Like right now, we're spending a lot of time in St. Kitts, or we're looking at some projects now in Jamaica. We have another project. We just opened a hotel in Antigua, and those cultures are just unbelievable. They're so. Those are the 2 parts. Latin America, it's harder to do business, but we love Latin America. Central America also is another great market, and then all the red states in the U.S. because the blue states are hard to do business.
I can't ever see you in Kansas. I can't see you in Kansas City. What was recently like an aha moment? Like we get older, we don't have the fresh ideas as much. What was the recent aha moment you had for the new business that you were like, this is good?
Well, I think it was, as it pertained, the Lifestyle HQ brand was just, I was telling him earlier, just to give him context, like if you sold Real Deal and he wanted to create the new Real Deal, you know all the tricks, right? You don't have the same ambition of running around like you did when we were growing up, but you're much smarter, so you don't have to run around. But the estate, I was back into the vulnerable state of doing something new, which I liked because it was now more medical. And the aha moment was realizing, talking to these doctors and understanding what their issue was of scale, and realizing that
the issue was to scale
their business, right? And you talk to all of them, whether they're concierge doctors, you talk to kind of the life insurance companies, who also was another big part of our channel, is working with life insurance companies to let them keep their patients or keep their clients alive. Yeah. So I kind of focused around who's motivated to keep Amir and Sam alive: ourselves, our families, our life insurance, our jobs. Yeah. Financially, I'm just putting the emotion out of it. Maybe the family not so much, but at least definitely us, right? And so we kind of went after that. And so at every step, it was like when I started 25 years ago, I was not a restaurateur, I was not a nightclub guy, and you're like, well, it makes sense. And then obviously Tony validating that was the kind of aha moment of him agreeing with the strategy and opening up his world.
If you didn't have to use money as a way to measure, or your family, what would you say would be success for this next venture?
I mean, I think the core mission of what we're doing with the estate business is changing the perception of preventative medicine. So I'm a perfect example of that, right? If I hadn't gone through this program, I would probably not be here today, right? That's just a fact. So saving lives, impacting communities, getting the pricing of this testing down, where you can actually...
Saving the lives of billionaires.
Well, yeah, I mean...
It's not for everyone.
Listen, you think about it, we were talking earlier about all these membership clubs, right? Like in New York, now everyone, it's like all members. I mean, that's $35,000 a year. Doing it with us, $35,000 a year buys you all the testing in 1 year of telehealth. So, and those aren't billionaires going into, the membership club. So, the idea is to get that further down. And what we talked to Tony about, another one of our partners, again, Richard Atias, who has created all these conferences in the Middle East and Europe, is how do we change the perception of the governments to make sure that this is a priority? So in most emerging countries in the world, you can't get life insurance or health insurance unless you go through full body MRI. Here, 24% of our GDP is spent in healthcare, and it is sick care. It's not healthcare, right? It's not predictive. It's reactive, and that's how the institutions are set up. So I look at that just from an economic perspective. How can you change that, where people are more motivated now to, fix the problem before it becomes a problem? And that's to me, it's like if you can save 10 or change 10 or 20 or 30 lives, that's a meaningful legacy, right? That you can kind of be very proud of.
Give me $200 million and I'll take you to Africa. We'll save more than 20 lives. But no, I'm kidding. I don't want to go to Africa. But there was a lot of businesses right now, they're trying to figure out their infrastructure in terms of operations and how AI is going to play into it. And you're like halfway into your system. Like you have 350 people in your office right now, in addition to all the other systems and organizations you have to work with. How are you making sure that it's being implemented where it needs to happen? Because it can be business changing. How you incorporate it.
We have our 4 verticals, and every one of them kind of has a different, I think, operating philosophy, right? Our business is a great business because we don't own any real estate, right? We manage on behalf of our owners. So that means you can scale up the business based off outside of your core original corporate G&A, you can scale up as the properties come online. And it's every property that comes online, 70-80% of that becomes profit. And you sign 30-year contracts. That's why you get the multiple, right? Now, at the property level, there's a lot of efficiencies that our job as a fiduciary to our owners is to run these properties as the most efficiently as possible. So that's something we're constantly doing and working with the best companies out there. It's not tech that we own, but I think to your point, how do you manage just through kind of your direct reports, and how do you make sure that your guys are being as efficient as possible? And that's just a constant evolution of the cycle of where that business is. Some of our businesses are older, they're much more mature. Some of our are newer, and you do the best you can.
I'm going to ask a few more questions, and this is a salon, so I want to encourage everybody to have a question to ask. But you started your career in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles was such an important part of nightlife, in the country. Do you feel like it still has that importance? Because a lot of the nightclubs have sort of shut down, and people feel very down about LA as a whole.
It's true. I mean, cities go through cycles, right? LA's just had an extended shitty cycle for a long time, and we still have a lot of. We have, 15 locations in LA, and one of our biggest offices is still in LA. But cycles nonetheless come. Like Miami now is starting to see a cycle, which just generally happens. Dubai, Miami, Nashville, all these kind of markets that have growth. But we look at LA still is the heartbeat of entertainment. So for us, we've bet big on LA. My family lives in LA. My roots are in LA, and so knowing that the next 5 years, we have a new police commissioner, we have a new DA. Right, a big part of LA was fear. Fear of going out. The perception of fear was actually worse than the reality of fear. We had a lot of issues where people didn't want to invest and take risk. But the next 5 years, you have the Olympics, you have the World Cup, you have the Super Bowl, you have big global kind of events that the city now is forced to invest in itself and give people the confidence. We had an 18-month almost writer's strike. We had a lot of kind of specific concerns, and you had other cities who were embracing risk takers. LA and California is not that state. They will do everything in their power.
It's a shame because there was such a core for it. Everybody was already there.
LA especially. LA was never really, San Francisco was the one that really got affected, by that, let's say, local bureaucracy. The unions were there. I mean, we couldn't operate. We had the Clift Hotel in San Francisco. We gave it back. Like, we can't fucking do lifestyle when the guy cutting the thing in the back is making $97 an hour. It doesn't pencil. LA was kind of its own hub, and then slowly, as over the last 4 or 5 years, there was more of a union element that came into LA.
So you feel like it's on the upswing, forced to be in the upswing.
I think
because they have to.
I think LA. I mean, we just invested, as I said, $40 million of new restaurants, new nightclubs, and new culinary centers in LA. But everything, just having done this now in multiple cycles, I think LA is going to have its moment. And it was 25 was going to be the moment, right? We saw all of our budgeting and everything, and then obviously the fires happened, which, slowed the moment, right? At least, unfortunate scenarios slowed the moment for 3-4 months, but nonetheless, those things are coming down the pipe. Those are macro events that are coming, and LA for the next 4 or 5 years will be the center of a lot of important kind of milestones for this country.
It's sort of sad to see with Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood's getting depleted and it's getting gutted, and it's not necessarily going to be the center where people make movies. And you see that industry just dying in Hollywood. In fact, we did a story about it today on how it's impacting residential real estate because people all of a sudden can't afford their mortgages who are in that industry, and it was such a big part of Los Angeles. Do you think that's going to be replaced with another industry? I mean, are there any other industries looking to go down to LA?
No. We're like the last of the Mohicans. Well, I mean, the streaming still is there, right? I mean, Netflix and all these other people, they're still based out of there. That's where the celebrities still are living. That's where the kind of studios are. If you go to Burbank, they're building more and more studios every day. So that business hasn't really been affected. And it's still the quality of life of people who live in LA. That's something they can't replace. I mean, you can't replace LA's kind of ecosystem and story. And LA is a resilient town. It's resilient people, and they'll figure it out. Once I think they've pushed back a lot now, especially on the crime piece, it's a cycle. I mean, New York. This is the worst environment now for nightlife in New York. I mean, when was the last time you went to a nightclub in New York?
I haven't.
Exactly, right? So, I mean, Vegas sucked a lot of the energy out of that. Miami sucked a lot of energy out of that. And those guys will go through cycles. So it's just, I think the next 5 to 10 years in LA is a good bet. We made one. And I think, for the reasons I mentioned.
I saw this menu from Live in Miami that for Ultra, they had a menu item that was for $500,000 for a VIP room. I mean, did you ever think like the VIP rooms and sort of those private sections would get that much money?
I think that those things, they're probably more from a PR perspective, right? We had one, I did a lot of projects in Vegas, and we did one nightclub in the 50-yard line of the Bellagio, right, called Hyde Bellagio. And we had a button where you could, for $125,000, you and your date or wife, whatever, you could sit there, have a beautiful bottle of Dom Perignon champagne, like a very expensive one, and hit a button, and all the fountains in the Bellagio would come up. Now, 2 people did it, and one of them was like, we gave away for free, but listen, people want to push the limits. You're living in a very influencer world. Celebrities are not as important as influencers. Influencers are their own channels. They found different ways to communicate with the world. And that's why we made such a big bet in that, of understanding that. And these guys have a tremendous amount of cash flow,
All right. What questions do we have? Yes.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this talk. In your candor, really your healthy product. I'd like to know, do you see or in general, the lifestyle of residential home as disrupted to senior living And how are you catering to your residents as they mature?
What was the second part of that? How are we catering?
Catering to your residents as they mature.
So I think lifestyle is a frame of mind, end of the day, right? So if you can bring that sensibility to any category, even like we started looking at not assisted living, but more mature living, if you will, and how you can create a better environment for that. That's something we're also looking at under 18 programs as well, and how to change, giving environments for kids to go to if they're going through certain things. But I definitely think you can take a mindset and disrupt any space. Our residences that are within our longevity and luxury platform, the best thing we can give them is, what do you give somebody who has everything, right? So you give them the tools, the dashboards, you give them the environments, and more importantly, the access to knowledge. We want to promote testing. So we think you can have all the apps in the world and all that, but if you don't know what's going on inside your body, it's hard to measure it. So that's how we look at it. And there's a lot of things we're doing in our programs that are, we call it in-suite, in residences, a lot of kind of biohacking things that we're doing. But the idea is not just when you're living there, when you're traveling, you have that same connectivity. That's where I think the premium comes in from.
Zillow Gone Wild, Samir, glad to have you here.
Will you be putting any Persian restaurants at the estate? Like a kebab can go a really long way for
Okay, that's a good protein. I've always dabbled of doing a Persian restaurant, and as a very proud Persian, there's only so much Persian you want to take, So, it was enough doing all these places in LA. The community's the community. But we always the best Persian chef in the whole world is my mom. So it's hard to, for me at least, and yeah, exactly. But that was one category. We did a brand called Clio, which is Mediterranean, that had a little bit of Mediterranean influence, and so we have done different brands, but no Persian restaurants yet.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your talk. What location-specific adaptations are you considering for the different markets as far as the estates brand is concerned, particularly when you're trying to balance the universal appeal of longevity with regional traditional practices?
There's key markets we identify, right? And these are markets, most of them we've done business in. And the biggest thing for a hotel brand is to have a great owner. It's the most important thing, right? I mean, our owners have to be committed to the property. They have to be funded. They have to have a long-term viewpoint, and they have to keep the brand standard. So we can go into a great location with a owner who doesn't want to spend money, and it becomes a battle. So we try to, every market we're in today, every project that we've announced has a very, very good ownership group. And all hotel companies are, that's kind of what you're predicated on. There are markets with the estate. Selfishly, I pick markets that I want to be in. I think to your point, like where I want my family to go, where I want to travel. So I have a little bit of luxury of saying I see myself wanting a vacation there. So it's a little bit more deliberate than like SLSs were, or Mondrian's, or even HQ, where we're just getting scale as a business. This is more of something we see ourselves doing for the next 30 or 40 years.
But is there, to his point, he's saying that, like, if you're, say, in a place where they don't believe in certain kind of a medicine, do you customize any part of the sort of the healthcare part of it to that region?
Yeah, a lot of our properties, it's not homogeneous that we're doing the same installation at every property. Some properties, like we're talking about an island right now in the English Channel, right, which is a private island that won't have any diagnostic. It'll be more holistic. It'll be more kind of human growth. It'll be more farm to table. So we just take that idea and you can customize it. But generally speaking, the core principles of what we do is providing environments for people to be connected to a lot of science-backed solutions, right? So, from our perspective, my job is to go be lucky enough to select some of the best thought leaders and give them scale and give them places that they can send their customers. And that becomes what I do. We're obviously never going to, and the estate is also built to evolve. So what we're doing today, we know that in 24 months, healthcare today will be much different than 24 months. So we've built that as opposed to saying, this is it. Yeah. This is our method. Our method is designed for evolution. Right. So we build our infrastructure for the new ideas to come in. So that's the other part that we focus on.
Yes.
I have a question. Can you hear me? Nice talk to hear your concept. And the main question, like sleep food is important. From where you outsourcing your food? Because food here, like I think Europe the best food. Are you importing food or you making it like growing somewhere?
Do you rely on local food sources, or do you ship them all to your different locations?
No, we don't. We're not in the logistics of food business because that's a tough business. Yeah, that's why we work with Michelin chefs who have the supply chain that they need for their brands, and those Michelin chefs are the reason they're as good as they are is they have a very strong position of which farms to work with, farm to table, local. So that's how we try to kind of focus it around the best. But generally speaking, I mean, we've been doing this for a long time. 200 bars and restaurants, and a lot of hotels. There's always a good local source you can find it. You can, from that perspective.
Is New York a market for estate?
We're looking like at the Catskills. We're looking at, we're getting pitched opportunities. Downtown, core New York, maybe for a residential only type project and for a longevity center. We are looking at a couple potential longevity centers, just the diagnostic testing here. But from a hotel perspective, I had 5 hotels here in this market, and it's a very unforgiving market.
The reason I answered the question is because about 5 years ago, we were working on a project that had to do something with health, but it wasn't like the estate. It was mostly plastic surgery.
Sure. Where
we were going to bring in, right here on Billionaires Road, 57th Street, where we were going to put up a building that had a hotel, and a portion of it was the
surgery center and outpatient. That people could recover and recover.
Come to
do their surgeries, stay there a couple of weeks, and then go home.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why I asked.
The first SLS I did in Beverly Hills, the second floor was an outpatient surgery center. I did that in 2008.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit of instinct back then. It was a lot of.
One more question. Yeah. You mentioned a lot of countries that you're putting in these hotels. What's wrong with the Amalfi Coast?
There's nothing wrong. We love the Amalfi Coast. We're actually doing a project in the Dolomites, which is northern Italy, at the foothills of where all this wellness started. There's nothing wrong with it. We love it. It's just that it's not something that has happened.
We have a castle we're converting into a 6-star hotel.
Okay.
Not too far from Capri. And we have some stuff in Amalfi and a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, let us know, sure.
Well, in Hudson, New York, there's a lot of brands that have gone there. Auberge and Six Senses and Soho House, Barn, and there was another one. And one last question, and we'll rock and roll. Yes?
I have actually a specific question about all these resorts, like upstates. How do you differentiate? Because a lot of these concepts, such as like Auberge, like Pure, like Ines, they have like a wellness, like they position themselves sometimes as a wellness like type of resort. They'll have like a spa, like a hot tub, but it's very limited. How do you differentiate yourself, like with the estates, to provide that extensive like, offering?
Well, I think wellness is a word that is very overused right now, right? So, I mean, it's just like lifestyle. Everything's like, Four Seasons is lifestyle, Walmart is lifestyle, Rolls-Royce is lifestyle. Everyone uses the category. But what I was trying to say earlier on, what we've done is we've gotten to the core pillars of our product. Our product is testing, it's med spa, it's functional medicine, and human performance, right? Those are the pillars. And for every one of them, we've partnered with the best companies we think in the world to do and integrate that into the property. So that's kind of how the model is built. And that's how, and in addition to that, none of these hotels have diagnostic centers. So it's end of the day, if you're trying to get a premium for residential or your guests, you have to provide more than just a one-off solution, right?
Sam, thank you so much. That was so wonderful. Thank you for being here. And thank you guys for all joining us tonight. And don't forget to subscribe. And that's it. Have a great night. Thank you, guys.